the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to Thee, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. In the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, a new recruit, maybe an old alcoholic, but new to the program, is told that if you don't find a power that you understand that is greater than your own mind, you will not get sober. And it's reiterated again and again. You must get out of your head and give all your power to a power greater than you, or you will not have a life of sobriety. You will continue drinking. And then everyone goes around and shares stories about this. Well, that crowd would understand the gospel for today. Priests have a hard time with it. I was talking to my fellow priests at an installation yesterday. I said, "What are you preaching on?" Philemon, the Old Testament. It's a hard thing to preach. One of my friends said, "You just have to dive right in." So I'm going to dive right in. Jesus is on his way to the cross. This is his big journey to Jerusalem. He has behind him this horde of people following him. He stops his journey, turns around, and says to them, "You think you want to follow me? Well, are you ready to hate your mother, hate your husband, hate your children, cut off completely, let them go, and follow me? Well, if you are not ready to do that, you cannot be my disciple." Hard words. Some of the reflections that I read in the commentary said it's just hyperbole. You got to watch out when they say just. It could be hyperbole. Jesus does use that, exaggerates a point to get a point across. However, he uses a couple of stories in this reading today to illustrate what he meant. So let's take a look at his stories, and then we'll take a look at Luke, the gospel writer, and see what help he gives us in understanding this. It is not meant to be an easy reading, but we would not be doing it service if we whitewash it. So let's take a look. First of all, he says, if you're going to build a tower, or build anything for that matter, you first have to get in there and dig, right? And lay a foundation. Well, speaking in spiritual terms, laying a foundation is your prayer life. This is like the stranger who came up to Jesus and said, "Lord, I say my prayers daily. I go to church. I give my money to the poor. I do good service work. What else do I need to do to get in the kingdom of heaven?" And Jesus tells him what? Sell everything. Go home and sell everything, give it to the poor, and then come follow me. We can dig the foundation, lay in all these prayers and our life of prayer and religiosity, and stick it in that foundation. But then what comes? What makes the tower? God builds the tower. And we have to be ready to let God use us as one of the bricks and have the bricks stacked on top of us. So the other story he tells is about getting an army together. This isn't very feminine imagery, and for that we just have to deal with it. But the point is universal, that in order to get an army, you need a lot of resources. You need a lot of soldiers. You need a lot of food to feed the soldiers. In order to fight an army that's twice as big as you, you've got to have all these resources. And he says this is an illustration of giving away all your possessions to the poor. Does that make sense? No. Because what he's talking about is the fidelity of this army. This army has to be devoted to its leader in a way that separates the army from their family. This is what they teach in our services, is this complete fidelity to whoever's running your commander or your regiment. We are supposed to have this kind of fidelity for our God. What Jesus asks us to do, of course, he never asks without showing us how he does it himself. So Luke, the great storyteller, is the one who describes families the best. He has the angel Gabriel come to Mary, and he has an angel appear to her cousin, Elizabeth, and her husband, their families together produced this incredible family connection of John the Baptist and Jesus. And Luke gives us stories to help us understand this point that Jesus wants to make. If you think of the battle that Jesus is going into as the desert at the beginning of his ministry, he goes into the desert absolutely alone. He fasts, no food, so he has no strength, no food, he's alone in the desert. And who is he fighting out there? The spiritual forces of evil. It's a cosmic battle that's going on at the beginning of the gospel story. And it's this cosmic battle that he points to at the end of his life. When he gives his life up, look around the cross and see who's there. Who's there? His mother, a disciple, maybe two. Everyone else is scattered. But Luke is written in a continuity of two books. So it's Luke and Acts. In the second book of Luke, in Acts, we see gathered together after Jesus' death in the upper room all of his disciples and his mother and his brothers. Luke tells us this, that this family reconfigured is the family that we learn to count on. You have to go through that shrivenness, shrove yourself. Get rid of everything, all of your attachments, and have your attachments solely on God. When you die, you're separated from your loved one, from your loved ones, or your spouse dies and leaves you alone. That abandonment that you feel, that is what we are asked to feel spiritually. Now, another story that's good to remember that Luke tells is when Jesus gets lost. After they visited the temple, his family and all the other people from Nazareth, they head home. It's a 2-day journey home. And after the end of the first day, they look around and there's no Jesus. Where's that 12-year-old? You don't miss him because their family is that extended. All these people from Nazareth are just one giant family. This is what family meant in those early days. And when they go back a full day's journey to find where Jesus is, where is he? He's in the temple. And he says, "Why were you worried about me? Didn't you know I would be with my Father and I'm about my Father's business or business affairs?" This is a play on words, but it is meant to be a slap in the face to his father, his earthly father, and his mother. And they are offended. Here he goes, being offensive right at the get-go. He's only 12. But the point is the same. His Father is the Father in heaven. His family here on earth is this cross. We're talking about picking up our cross and carrying it and following Jesus. We have this alignment with God and this commitment to our families. We have to have them both in tension. And if you don't feel that tension, you're not quite there yet. Now, another way of looking at this is to project into the future and to see that in the early days of the Christian movement, people were being separated from their families. A wife would decide to follow Christ and her husband didn't get it. And they would be separated spiritually. We had members of families fighting with each other, some following this new Christian movement and others not. So Luke tells the entire story of what this does to families. But he wants our attention on what happens in this commitment that we have to God. In the third step of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the alcoholic says in a group, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. This decision is what Jesus wants you to make, to be willing to turn over everything, including all your attachments. Your possessions include your spouse and your children, but whose are they really? They're God's. And in this spiritual way, we have to learn to let them find God in their own ways, let your spouse find God in his own way. And for as far as my spiritual life is concerned, I'm responsible for this right here. It's a hard lesson, but it has spiritual truth. And the only thing that Jesus can count on is that most of his disciples won't get it. When he's taken away, they all run away. And he forgives us all and gathers us all up again. But this is the choice that we have, is to look at your family in a different way today. Go home and treasure them all the more because they don't belong to you. Know that they belong to God, and know that your alignment with God is not their business, it's your business.